We hope you enjoy this episode of the Modern Arizona podcast. But first, an important message for our listeners.
Hello, this is Billie Tarascio, owner of Modern Law. We're a family law firm in Phoenix, Arizona, with offices throughout the state. We have attorneys who can help you with every aspect of your family law case. We also have a legal clinic run by students for those of you who need budget-friendly resources, and we have lawyers who've been practicing for more than 20 years. Collectively, Modern Law has more than 200 years of legal experience. So when you hire Modern Law, you're not just getting an attorney, you're getting a team. If you live in Arizona and need representation, call us today. That's 480-649-2905 or visit us at mymodernlaw.com. Hello and welcome to the Modern Arizona podcast. I am your host, Billie Tarascio, joined today by Deborah Donenfeld from New York and Photosynthesis Coaching. Deborah, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
I'll tell you, the first thing that jumped out to me is photosynthesis coaching, because I'm in Phoenix, you're in New York, and just photosynthesis, I think of like taking the sun and turning it into like energy.
Yeah, absolutely. That's right. How can you harness your own light and turn that into energy for yourself, right? And all of the metaphors about blooming and blossoming into something new and beautiful.
Very, very cool. Now you focus your specialty on helping people who are midlife, like
hmm
me, revitalize their life and start over when they find themselves in a position where they need to start over and redefine their whole life.
That's right. And often what happens to people in midlife is even if things aren't perfect, you kind of you've settled in. You kind of feel like, "Oh, maybe I wanna work a little bit on this, or I wanna work a little bit on that," and what often happens is the rug just gets pulled out from under you, and you do feel like you have to start over at a time in your life when you weren't planning on that. So, even if, let's say, a divorce, for instance, even if that is your choice, it can still feel like everything has just been thrown up in the air in your life, and you're not quite sure how to navigate it. So yeah,
Yeah.
that's what I help with.
I've also read that there is a dip in happiness where
Mhm.
people want to, you're kind of out of the time where you're grinding and your kids maybe aren't little anymore, and you may be looking at your life feeling like, is is this where I thought I'd be? Is this what I want? Am I happy? So there's
Yeah,
all
I
sorts of
think
reasons
it's
people might want to
so many
reinvent
reasons, and I think that
themselves.
that cliche of the midlife crisis, it's kind of a cliche for a reason. Like that,
Mm-hmm.
I like the idea of the midlife dip. Like there is a point where you things are starting to change, and you start thinking, "Is this it? Is this my purpose? If my purpose was my kids, now my kids are out of the house. Who am I supposed to be? What am I supposed to be doing?" Yeah, I think that there might be a lot of reasons where you start looking for a change.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And it's also an opportunity. I always think
Mhm.
change is an opportunity, growth is an opportunity, stagnation is not our friend. So when people come to you, are they mostly upset and need to start over?
It kind of runs the gamut. I do get a lot of people who are upset and, um, unsure, having a lot of resistance to the change that's being brought their way. So it could be a divorce that they didn't want. It could have been that they didn't get tenure in their academic job after putting 20 years in.
Mm-hmm.
It could be any number of things or that sort of come their way that they're like, "Whoa, I don't want this, and I don't know who I am if I need to hold on so tightly that I can't actually think about taking the next step because I'm holding on." And then
Yeah.
there are people who come and they're like, "I have been trying to make this change, and I can't, and I don't know why it is that I can't step forward into this change that I really want." So that's also happening. And then I want to make the change, like maybe I want a new job or I don't like my job, or maybe I want to retire, but I'm afraid. And so those are all the the different scenarios that people come to me with.
Can I ask, what is midlife? What ages are we talking about there?
Well, it's funny because I reached out to somebody, I think I was referred to somebody who was in her 30s, and she wrote back to me saying, I thought you work with middle-aged people. And I thought, oh, okay, 30s, it's probably what you've done in your life up until now.
Okay.
So how do you define yourself? I would say generally the people who are coming to me are in their 40s, 50s, 60s. And I
Got
do
it.
have some people on the outer edges of that. I have a couple of
Mm.
clients right now who are in their 70s. I've worked with people in their 30s and their 20s. But generally, I would say it's 40s, 50s, and 60s. But that's sort of up to you to define. Do you define yourself as being in midlife or
Mm-hmm.
on the other end of that? Either way, right?
Yeah, yeah. Okay, so how did you find yourself in this niche? What is your story that brought you here?
Yeah. So I found myself going through a lot of different changes at once. I really had the rug pulled out from under me in a few different ways. So it was right at the time that my husband and I were getting a divorce. Um, that was something I knew was coming. Um, in a lot of ways, it was my choice. That was not a surprise. It was still very hard. It was also very, very hard to come to that decision. I think I did a lot of mourning in the 3 years leading up to that.
Mm-hmm.
And then right at the time that we were going to tell our kids that we were separating, I found out that my husband's business had completely tanked. He
Mm.
had no money in his business account at all. Like the balance was zero. And we had enough in our personal account to pay the next mortgage payment. So all of a sudden, everything was changing. Now I thought I was going to stay in our apartment. Now, clearly, we were going to have to sell our apartment. I wasn't bringing in enough income on my own to support all of us. So I knew that that was going to have to change. I was going to have to, and I started doing all kinds of odd jobs. I was actually a photographer at the time, so I was still building my business. I was doing personal assisting on the side. I was doing all kinds of things, and I was looking for full-time work because I was basically there was a 2-year period where I was watching the proceeds from our apartment sale dwindle as I was supporting all of us on that. And we had to move. We'd been living in that apartment for 14 years. We had to move to a totally different neighborhood. I had to uproot my kids. They did stay in their same school, so that was a good thing. But it was like 4 different big changes, any one of which would have been hard to navigate that I sort of had to go through at once. And the pragmatic things I needed to do. I looked for work. I worked nonstop. I took care of my kids. I did all the things I had to do, and I leaned in really hard to all the soft skills. I kept going to therapy. I kept going to yoga. I did a trade so that I could go to yoga whenever I needed to. I kept up my morning practice. I read self-help books and talked to friends and just did everything that I could possibly do so that I knew I was being as proactive as possible. And I really feel like, wow, I would have loved to have somebody holding my hand and guiding me through that because luckily I had been doing a lot of work on myself and I had put a lot of practices into place and I could really lean into that, but I really would have loved to have a guide. And so when I started thinking about who it was that I wanted to work with in my coaching practice, I felt like I would kind of want to be that guide
Mm-hmm.
to people in this stage of life who are sort of bowled over by circumstances in their life that maybe they feel like they didn't have control over.
Mm-hmm. So were you already a coach?
So I was a photographer and I was a coach. Um, there was a period where I was more focused on my photography, but also working as a coach when clients came my way. At a certain point, that kind of switched around, and I started really focusing a lot on my coaching practice. But I've been coaching for about 13 years now.
Got it. All right. And how long has it been since your big life changes started?
That was in, I would I would say this was end of 2011, and we
Okay.
separated beginning of 2012.
Okay. And how long did it take for you to feel like your new normal, totally settled in your new life after all that
Yeah.
change?
So I feel like it happened in stages and phases. So in terms of the divorce, whereas I know it's a big surprise for a lot of people and it takes them a long time. Mentioned I kind of worked through this for about 3 years before we actually separated. So
Mhm,
the separation itself wasn't as hard on me at that time because I had
mhm.
done a lot of work for 3 years prior. But all the rest of it, all the rest of the upheaval, um, I would say it was at least 2 years,
Got it.
maybe a little bit more for me to feel like, okay, I've got this. I'm
Mhm.
moving forward. I have some stability now.
And how
And then,
long
of
did
course,
it
the work
take?
continues.
Right,
But yeah,
right. How long did it take your kids?
my kids did really well. I feel really, really lucky. My son was 16.
Mm,
He was very angry in general before we
mhm, mhm.
separated.
Right.
You know, like
16-year-old
16
boys.
year olds can be that way, right? And I
Yeah.
thought, okay, he's a teenager. This is what he's going through. But I have to say that the minute we separated, the minute we moved into that anger sort of dissipated. So I think that he
Wow.
was part of it, at least, was really responding to the energy in the house, which
Mhm,
was not great.
mhm. Never is right
And
before divorce.
yeah, right. And he was able to somehow sort of like relax after
Mhm,
that. Um, my daughter, it was a little bit harder, but again, she had like a 2-week period after we moved. It was difficult for her to take the news for both of them really. Um, but there was a 2-week period where I felt like she was not quite herself.
mhm.
Um, but I felt like after that she kind of came into she sort of came back to herself and she did okay. I would say my kids are still working on their relationship with their dad, you know, in a way. Um, and maybe that's going to be a lifelong project.
Yeah. So if there are people who are listening and they are kind of stuck, or they're just not sure if they're making the right choices,
Hmm.
what guidance could you offer them? Or what are the exercises that you might take someone through?
Right. So I feel like it's really, really important to tap into your own intuition and your own self awareness. That's a huge part of my practice. How can I tell what is intuition and what's fear?
Yeah.
Right? How can I figure that out? How can I have all of these things really weighing on me. How can I figure out what is the most important thing to address? Because right now I can't address any of them because they all feel so overwhelming.
Hmm.
So those are the things that I focus on. Some of the tools that I use are certainly somatic practices, meaning just keying into what you're feeling and how that feels in the body.
Hmm.
Because with every emotion comes an actual physical feeling on the body level. How can we like focus on that instead of trying to push it away? Let's just get curious about it. That's sort of a first step in becoming more self-aware. Um, we do a lot of journaling, and I will often have specific writing exercises that I'll ask them to do to help them get more in touch. Um, Meditation in one form or another. So you might say a lot of people say I'm really bad at meditating. There's actually no such thing as that. That doesn't exist. Monkey mind is the thing that everybody has, right? But you also may not enjoy sitting and meditating. Maybe you want to be more active. Maybe you want to do a walking meditation. Or I always say, I see where I live, I see a lot of surfers. I feel like surfing is really a meditation as well. There are a lot of activities that if you're super focused on that and you're bringing your mind back to that thing, that can be a meditation. So I think that's a really important tool as well.
I want to explore that some more because that is fascinating. Um, how I feel like I'm really bad at meditating. Aren't you supposed to like clear your mind and then stay
Well,
clear? How do
that's
you
the
even do
that's
that?
right. I know. I think that we all have this idea that we're supposed to, in order to be a successful meditator, that means that our mind has to be completely clear. That's the goal, right? But the goal is actually to watch what's happening. And
Mm,
so every time your mind wanders, the second you catch it and you say, oh, thoughts, you just label them, oh, thinking, and you bring yourself back to your breath or your mantra or whatever it is that you're watching, that's meditation. You're doing it, and the practice is to do it over and over again. Every time your mind wanders, that you catch it and you say, "Oh, thoughts," and you bring it back. It's like a non-judgmental. I think that where we go often is, "Oh, I'm thinking again. See, I can't do this." And the key is to sort of not judge it, understand that everybody, even like the monk on the top of the mountain, is doing the same practice because he is also human.
mm-hmm,
And that's what happens, and that's why it's a practice.
mm-hmm. That's very non-judgmental of you. It's very
That's the
sounds very
key.
yoga instructor.
Well, yoga is also a meditation.
That's the only time I can do it, because
Mhm.
you've got all these things going on at once, right? You're working out, plus you're gaining flexibility and you're meditating. And it's like
And you're
the
meditating.
ultimate like multitasking for wellness.
Exactly. And, I since the pandemic, I've actually been doing a lot of yoga at home, but I do think that there's a benefit to going to that other place. You don't
Mm,
have your phone next to you,
mhm,
and you're out of your environment, and you can, I don't know if justify is the right word, but you kind of enjoy it because of all this multitasking aspect to it, right?
mhm,
And you
mhm,
completely give yourself over to it. For the hour and a half that I'm here, this is what I'm going to be doing.
mhm. I do feel like it works a lot better for me to go somewhere else because there's an
Hmm.
accountability of the other people in the room that
Mm.
are like, stay here, stop it, don't get distracted, don't
Right.
go do something productive, S-
Mhm.
leave it alone. And because it
Nope.
is productive, but
Yeah, it's like a kind of accountability, which is helpful
mm-hmm,
for all of us. That's a big part of
mm-hmm,
coaching, right? Like, I
mm-hmm,
want to be held accountable for the things that I say I'm going to do or that I want to do. I've made this commitment to myself, and you're going to help me by holding me accountable. And that sounds like what you're getting from going to a yoga class.
I need to. It's what I need to be doing. But yes, you are absolutely correct. This is Billie Tarascio, owner of Win Without Law School and Modern Law. Win Without Law School is a program that operates nationally and helps people who are representing themselves or who just need more help. If you are in a family court case and you're feeling confused, you need direction, you need help figuring out questions to procedural or strategic issues, Win Without Law School can help. At Win Without Law School, you've got two experienced attorneys, me and my partner Julie Lebenz, who can guide you through the court process and help you troubleshoot your case. You've got access to courses, planners, checklists, and live Q&A. Our live Q&A is where you can get help from us and your community. We also have a closed Facebook group just for members where you all can share your experience, share your pleadings, get advice, and mentorship. Join us today at winwithoutlawschool.com. That's winwithoutlawschool.com. So how long do you usually work with someone?
So it really depends. Um, the minimum amount of time that I work with somebody is 3 months.
Mm-hmm.
Usually people stay for longer
Mm-hmm.
because they feel like they're getting some kind of benefit. I think the longest I've worked with somebody is 6 years. That is unusual. That's unusual, but I have a few clients now who I've been working with for about a year and a half. Um, and some people do, want to just work for the 3 months. They have something very specific and they want to accomplish that. And that's their focus. And at the end of the 3 months, if they feel like they have hit that goal, then they feel done.
Mhm.
So it kind of depends.
Is it all one-on-one coaching, or do you do any group coaching?
I've done a few workshops, so once in a while I do that, but it's not a regular thing.
Mhm,
Mostly it's one-on-one and
mhm,
weekly
mhm,
coaching.
mhm. I've heard coaches talk a lot about the differences between therapy and coaching. What is your thought on that?
Yeah. Um, yeah, I have a very specific way that I talk about it, and I don't know if it's the same as other coaches, but you can tell me. Um, First of all, if somebody comes to me with some kind of like clinical depression or high levels of anxiety that they can't control, or addiction issues, or anything that is really like a clinical diagnosis, I am not trained for that. I would definitely go to therapy for that, and I would send somebody. Or I've had people come to me with suicidal ideation. That is not something that I'm trained for. So I always refer them um, to therapists. Um, I think that the area of overlap for me is that focus on emotional intelligence, self-awareness. There is going to be that a little bit of overlap there. Um, but there's also that action and accountability piece that coaching does. I think most coaches do, and I definitely do, where we're going to, at the end of every session, what would be helpful to expand on in terms of what we've learned today, that what kind of action would be helpful for you to do this week? And then I'll hold you accountable to it the next week. And
Hmm.
sometimes they'll say, that's great. I want to do this particular thing. And, um, but I also have these 3 things on my to-do list that I want you to hold me accountable for. And I'll do that as well. So there's that action and accountability piece. And I feel like there's a third thing that I usually say, but it's escaping me at the moment.
Okay. All right. So homework. Homework is definitely a difference.
Hmm.
How do you know the difference between clinical depression and a mindset issue?
Um, I would say if anybody comes to me and says, I'm seriously depressed, I'm not gonna split hairs. Like it's not worth it to me if they really have needs around depression, they should seek a professional who deals with depression. Um, if they come to me and they say, I'm seeing a therapist for my
Hmm.
depression,
Hmm.
um, but I also want to work with a coach,
Hmm.
I can then work with them on mindset issues. I'm happy
Hmm.
to do that. But
Hmm.
but I want to be sure that they're they're being taken care of in that way. I don't think it's really for me to decide. Though if I'm working with somebody and I start to feel like this is not a circumstantial thing, or maybe there's something chemical going on, or they're going down a road of suicidal ideation, or any of those things, I'm going to say, okay, we need to stop, or you need to. I really, I would never say you need to, to see a therapist, but I would explore that with them.
Sure.
And and if it was really serious, I mean, I might say, you're talking about some really serious things. You're saying some things that um, I'm not trained to address these issues, but it does sound like you need to talk to somebody about them.
Hmm. Got it. All right. And how
Yeah.
often does that happen?
Pretty infrequently,
Hmm.
because generally I know from when I meet them
Hmm.
if that's going to be an issue, and I'll point them in the direction before we start working together.
Hmm.
Um, yeah. It
Okay.
it has happened a few times during a consult where I've kind of
Mhm.
stopped the consult and said, "Listen, I think I'm not the right fit for you.
Sure.
These are the
Yeah.
reasons."
It has to be a good fit, right?
Well, it has to be a good fit in all kinds of ways, right? We
Right.
need to feel a connection. They need to feel heard and understood. And I need to feel like I can help them.
Mhm. Wonderful.
Yeah,
It sounds like you really love what you're doing, and it's providing a lot of help and movement in people's lives.
I do love it. Yeah, and I think that's exactly why, it's so gratifying to help people.
Can you
And
give
it's
me some
so
examples of maybe where somebody started and where they were able to get?
sure. Um, yeah, I had a particular client who worked with me for 6 months. He came to me because he had a whole host of things that he was trying to decide, and he
Mm,
was very unhappy in a lot of aspects of his life. And one of them was, I don't really want to be at my job anymore. Should I
mhm,
retire early? He was in his early 50s.
mhm,
Um, issues in his marriage.
mhm,
Should we move? Like big decisions, right? And we worked through sort of exactly what we were talking about earlier to sort of what is the main nugget here? Like what's the main decision? I like to use the analogy of the backpack filled with rocks. Like you come to me with a backpack full of very heavy rocks that are weighing you down as you walk through your life. And let's remove the largest rock. Let's figure out what that largest rock is so we can take that out and give you a little bit of relief. And then let's see what happens after that. So what ended up being the largest rock for him was really this decision about whether he should retire or not.
mm. So how did
And
you find out? So he's got all these things. He's got marriage,
mhm,
moving, working. How do you figure
mhm.
out what's the one thing?
Well, one of the ways that I help them, because I'm really helping them to figure it out, right?
Right.
That's what a coach does, is sort of elicit it from them. So one of the things is to get them to slow down, take a breath, maybe close their eyes, go within, and they can usually access what is the thing that's the most present for them in that moment. And as we start working on that, maybe something else will sort of try to get in. But if this is the thing, usually this is the thing, and we can just sort of work through it. And then what happens is sometimes you you work your way through that. They make a decision and they feel good about that. And then the next largest rock kind of pops up. For this particular person, he made this decision about retiring early. He decided he did want to retire early. He chose a date. He retired, and he just felt like it was the best decision he ever made. All of his fears
Um,
about what will I do with myself and what will happen and what will my relationship with my wife be and all of these other fears kind of fell away. He had also had a history of depression that had been addressed with a
mhm.
therapist, and I sort of gave him tools for when it was tools for self-awareness that were going to help him when he felt things, that kind of feeling coming on. And I'm sure he got all kinds of other tools from his therapist in the past. So we worked a little bit longer after he retired, and all of those other issues that he had brought up in the beginning, he was like, yeah, they're not, they don't really feel like such a big deal. My wife and I are getting along great. I don't really feel like I have to move now. Maybe one day I will, but I feel like I have the tools to make those decisions at the time. I don't feel so scared about those decisions anymore. And that was like the best possible reason for stopping working together. Like I was so happy. He said, I think we're done. And I kind of thought, yeah, you're right.
That's
You're in
so
a great place.
great.
Yeah, that was
Okay.
great.
Well, how do people find you to work with you?
So they can find me through my website, which is photosynthesiscoaching.com. As long as you can spell photosynthesis, you can find me. I chose a name that's hard to spell.
A little bit.
Um, yeah, and then you can just schedule. I offer a free consult, and it's a pretty robust consult. It's 45 minutes. And so there's always, whether or not you decide to move forward, you'll definitely get value out of that. So I encourage anybody who's even a little curious, like, what does this mean? What could this be for me? To just go on to my website and schedule a time to chat with me.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much, Deborah. I really appreciate your time and I've enjoyed meeting you. And I think this is going to be a great episode.
Oh, thank you so much. It was really great to speak with you too.
Thanks so much for listening to the Modern Arizona podcast. If you've enjoyed what you've heard today, make sure to download it, like it, leave a review, and share it with your friends. If you know someone who would be a good guest or you would like to be on the Modern Arizona podcast, make sure to give us an email or reach out to us at mymodernlaw.com.